The painting behind me is an original oil portrait of Ava Gardner from Showboat, and it's kind of a different color scheme. It was done by an artist who, believe it or not, his name was Dick Tracy, and it reflected one of my favorite actresses. People say, "Who was your favorite movie star?" I always answer, Ava Gardner. And I never met Ava Gardner, but I met all the members of her family, her sister Inez, and all of her sisters. And I went to her home in Smithfield, North Carolina, where she grew up. I went to her apartment in London later on. She was dead then, but I went all over the neighborhood and talked to people who knew her. She to me was the epitome of a movie star because she didn't give a damn about the whole thing. She approached Louis B. Mayer as if he was an enemy, and she seemed to know that the whole thing was a circus, that it didn't make sense, and she didn't care. She never cared about top billing. She always liked the parts that were shorter because she got the same money for a shorter part. And of course, she was the one woman that Frank Sinatra could not manage. And I mean, the daughter, her sister told me a story about Inez Gardner Grimes, who lived in Smithfield, North Carolina. They went up to visit Ava when she was married to Frank, and they were going to the heavyweight championship fight, which featured Rocky Marciano. And Ava came flying into the hotel room and said, "Inez, pack, we're leaving." She says, "Ava, what's wrong?" "I'm not staying another day with that bastard. He can't sing anyway. He can't sing, and he's egotistical. We're leaving." She says, "Ava, we're going to the heavyweight championship fight tonight. I want to go." "Well, whose sister are you? Are you my sister or his sister? We're leaving." "Ava, you will make up tomorrow and this will all be forgotten." "Well, I'm leaving." And so she said they moved to the hotel next door. They only moved one hotel down the street. And her husband went with Frank to the Rocky Marciano heavyweight fight. And sure enough, she said, the next day they were lovey-dovey. And Inez told me, she said, they could not live together. They absolutely were too much alike. They both had the temperaments. They were both jealous. They was constantly saying that one was making out with somebody else, and Ava often was, apparently, and so was he. But there were umpteen thousand Ava Gardner stories, which leads me to tell you that sometimes you can do the best profiles on a star when you don't actually interview them, but you interview people who knew them. So I really have talked to hundreds of people who worked with Ava Gardner, who knew her, and she was a unique star. She was a movie star. And she was not a bad actress. Her performance in Night of the Iguana and in Snows of Kilimanjaro, I thought, were not bad. So anyway, the portrait there is there, and that portrait, you will see it someday in the Ava Gardner Museum in Smithfield, North Carolina. But dealing with the more serious side of acting, now we don't want to get too serious here because I don't want to bore you, but I'm going to tell you about one of the most unlikely friendships that ever happened to me. Extremely unlikely. And it was with Laurence Olivier, who insisted that I call him Larry, which to this day I feel like a fool calling him Larry. But he came to Norfolk, Virginia to do research on Douglas MacArthur because he was playing Douglas MacArthur in a film which was called Inchon, and which goes into movie infamy as one of the worst movies ever made. And I thought at the time, he's all wrong to play Douglas MacArthur. Laurence Olivier was in the 70s at the time, and he did not look like Douglas MacArthur. But anyway, I went down and I met him, and immediately he said, "Oh dear boy, I'm so glad to meet you, and please excuse me for taking this part. I never should have taken the part." And I said, "Well, Lord Olivier." No, Lord Olivier, none of that. "Sir Lawrence, no, Larry, please." and what is your name? And I said, my name is Mal Vincent. And he said, well, Mal is a name that means bad in most languages. I said, yes, I know. And he says, well, we will overlook it. We have many things to overlook in life, don't we? So I went in with him, and we looked at the newsreels, which featured Douglas MacArthur in his Old Soldiers Never Die, They Just Fade Away, the newsreels, over and over 25 times. I was sitting in the row behind him, and he would go to full attention when it came on. Top stress attention. The minute it was over, he would sink back into his seat, defeated and looking quite old. And he looked around at me and he said, oh dear boy, no, you don't have to stay. You must be bored to death. And I said, no, I'm not bored. I'm very interested in what you're doing. He said, I should not have taken the part, but he says, it's just a little cameo thing, and I'm trying to leave some money for the children. And he said, I did not make a great deal of money from playing the plays, the writings of William Shakespeare. He said, I could be quite a wealthy man if I have done more movies, but I did too much stage, and my wife has often told me that I did too many stage performances. So I'm now doing a few little things that pay quite well so that I can leave something for the children. And I said, well, I understand. So he says, well, we're going to lunch. This is another. So we went to lunch, and during lunch, some tourists came over, and they said, we recognize you. Weren't you in something? Yes, you were in that camera commercial, Polaroid camera commercial. And he looked at me, and I looked up toward the ceiling and rolled my eyes. And I think that's when we became friends at that moment, because I said, yes, he was in that. And I said, by the way, he also played King Lear. Who? I said, he also played King Lear. And he said, thank you very much. So nice to have met you. And he made no comment. He did not say anything derisive about these people. But it was a signal between us of what. So we had lunch, and I will tell you something that I always remember as a part of creative thinking. There was a photograph of Douglas MacArthur hanging on the wall in this restaurant, which was the Town Point Club in Norfolk, Virginia. And he did not know I was looking. I came around the corner, and he was running his hand over his face as if he were a blind man reading Braille. And he was running his hand over his face, and he caught me looking, and he said, oh, dear boy, don't worry. Don't worry anymore. I'm going to get something. It won't be much, but it will be something. And I said, well, I understand what, I said, are you trying to communicate? He said, well, we all try to communicate, don't we? But it happens so seldom. He went, so during lunch, we were having lunch, and he said, dear boy, I wanted to ask, do you work by any chance for a newspaper? I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I am in the later years of reclining, and that means that I decline to do interviews. I do not do interviews. He said, is that a notebook you have there under the table? I said, yes, it is. And you are taking notes? I said, yes. I said, give it to me. And I thought, He said, all right. He said, I will, I'm opening in a play in New York very soon. And I am not in the play, but I am directing my wife, Dame Joan Plowright, in a play. And I want to invite you to come up to the opening night, and I want you to give me a really honest opinion of what you think. And I said, oh, it would be delightful. And he said, I'm going to write you some information that you need. So he took my notebook, turned over to another page, and started writing. And people came back and said, what is he doing? I said, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know. He worked for like 10 minutes on this, and he signed it at the end L. Olivier, which was very good because I actually had 8 pages of handwritten material by Laurence Olivier, but if he hadn't signed it, he said, here you are, this is all you need to know. Now, no more notes and no more questions. He says, we can talk as if we were human beings, can we not? I said, yes, Lord. Larry, please. I said, yes. This is all you need to know, and I prepared this for you. Well, I'm reading it, and it reads just like a press release. It's Laurence Olivier is directing Joan Plowright in the Philomena was the name of the play. It's opening on such and such a date, and it is written by blah, blah, blah. It was a regular press release, handwritten by Laurence Olivier, which I still have, by the way, of course. And I did go up to and it's like, let's have lunch sometime. I thought, I'll never hear from this. 3 days before the opening, I get a call, and he said, this is his secretary saying, are you coming up? We have you on the list. Are you coming up for the opening? And I said, well, I think so. I think I'd better go, So I did go, and another thing, during the intermission of the play was called Philomena. If you've never heard of it, don't feel strange because it did not run long and it was a flop. But during the intermission, an usher comes down and says, and I was on an aisle seat, remain in your seat during the intermission. Very ominously. I'm thinking, what? So then he comes in, now we're ready for you now. Glynis Johns, if you know Glynis Johns, was sitting in front of me, a very prominent British actress. The two of you may come up now. In the back of the theater in an office, Laurence Olivier was receiving guests. It was a little like being blessed by the Pope. And he comes in and he says, oh dear boy, you are so welcome to me. You have come so far for our little entertainment, and I do hope you're finding something of worth in it. And you've come so far. Well, actually, I've only come from Norfolk, Virginia, which is a 1-hour flight. It was not too far. But Glynis Johns was, and he said, Glynis, dear, sweet Glynis. And Glynis Johns says, Larry, I noticed that you are directing Joan in the play tonight. It must be unusual for you because we all know that you don't direct her at home at all. And he says, oh, Glynis, you're always so humorous. We always love your humor. And she went out. So anyway, that was, and the play did not run. I did meet Joan Plowright afterwards. But I add that he asked me at one point, dear boy, what is this dialect you speak? And I was taken aback. I thought, well, I guess you were referring to this is a southern accent. It is exactly what I want. May I use it? May I use it? I said, well, I don't know what you mean. I said, I use it. I am forced to use it. He says, no, it's exactly what I want. I've been looking for this. I'm doing a play and I'm trying to get the right accent, and this is perfect. Will you make a tape for me? And I don't want you reading anything. I want you to speak quite naturally as you speak, because if you read anything, it will be different. I said, what is the role? And he says, I'm doing Big Daddy in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And I said, Larry, I will be glad to do it for you, but this accent is not right for Big Daddy. What do you mean? I said, it's a southern accent. I said, Big Daddy was from Mississippi. And I said, whatever my accent is, I hasten to tell you it is not Mississippi. And he said, well, aren't they all the same? And I said, no, Larry. I said, that is often happens in Hollywood. They're not all the same. Well, I like it anyway. Will you do the tape? I said, well, I will do the tape. I will be glad to do the tape. He did later do the television production in which Natalie Wood played Maggie the Cat, Robert Wagner played Brick, and Laurence Olivier played Big Daddy in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. It was not very good. And by the way, I do not think that accent he used in the show was my accent, but I can always tell people that I worked with Laurence Olivier as his dialect coach shortly. And we did have a friendship. He invited me to London to see him in Long Day's Journey into Night, and I went. He sent me gifts, which it was quite unusual. The phone would ring, and I would say, "Oh, Lord Olivier, Larry, it's Larry, dear boy." And he said, "I'm sending you a little gift." And I said, "Well, thank you very much." The gift was always a box of Cuban cigars, which I think, by the way, were illegal. But nonetheless, I did not particularly want the Cuban cigars. But I convinced him apparently that I did. And I said, "Oh, this is so wonderful." And he said, "I'm sending you a box of Cuban cigars." Meanwhile, I was trying to give the Cuban cigars away to people. And but anyway, this friendship went on for quite a while on telephone. Joan Plowright, I did meet her, his wife, and she said, and I was quite flattered that she knew who I was, and she said, "Oh, you're the one with the accent, you did the tape." So I thought maybe she heard the tape, I don't know. And she was in Philomena, this was at the opening night of Philomena, and she said, "Well, what did you think of the play tonight?" And actually, I did find it, honestly, quite an amusing comedy of no substance, but a comedy, a trivial comedy. And I said, "Well, I enjoyed it." And she said, "Well, I'm glad you did." And she said, "I do hope you come back another night, and next time, bring some friends and pay." I said, "Pay?" Indeed. She said, "We will be lucky to run for 2 weeks in this play. I'm telling you, we will be lucky to run." She was quite right. It only ran 1 week. But anyway, so my adventures with Laurence Olivier, which I find most unusual and hardly would ever happen. I mean, really. But, so I can tell you want more?
Okay.
Meryl Streep for Mal, with all best wishes. Well, I don't really get I don't really get autographs because I don't think it's professional, really. But Meryl Streep is one of the few people I've got that is respectable, regarded as the greatest actress of our generation. Let's face it, and every time she sneezes, she's nominated for an Academy Award. So I mean, I don't mind. I'm not ashamed to show you that because the picture was much older than she was at the time. It was a young Meryl, but she was older when she signed it. But anyway, I remember back the first interview with Meryl Streep. I was very excited. The great Meryl Streep, the legendary Meryl Streep. Oh, I was very disappointed. She giggled. She giggled at the interview, and she did not want to talk about theories of acting. She did not want to talk about acting, approaching roles. To tell you the truth, I couldn't exactly find what she wanted to talk about. But I did learn very quickly that if you meet Meryl Streep, a question that you should not ask her is not about how she approaches accents. She does not like the question. And she says to me, "Oh, what do you mean using accents?" She has heard it very often as well, we know. She is famous for doing accents. I mean, Danish in Out of Africa, Australian in that thing with the dogs, the dingo dogs, whatever. Every film is a different accent. And I wanted to tell her, I was going to say Meryl, but I didn't dare. As long as you are consistent all the way through, you could fool me, because I probably would not know a Danish accent. But if you are consistent all the way through, I will accept it as being a Danish accent. But she told me, she says, I am not a circus performer who jumps through a hoop. And an accent is just one of the tools that I use And I really get tired of members of the press asking about accents. I said, well, that is true. I'm sure you do, but it's the first and only time that I have asked about it. But as the years went by, there's a new Meryl Streep now. She is delightful. She is very much at ease with the press. She still doesn't like to talk about theories of acting or about acting in general, but she is very much at ease with the press now. Now, I will tell you, there are a number of people I've interviewed who were not at ease with the press, and a number of people I got that a lot of other journalists didn't get. One was Barbra Streisand. Now, Barbara had a reputation for being tough. Tough is a nice word for it, with the press. And the first time I met her was for a picture called Up the Sandbox. Now, it's not one of her most popular films, and that's why I got the interview. I have learned very famous actors will give you interviews for movies that may flop. For the hit movies, they don't need you. But anyway, I did an interview, and she said to me, I'll give you 5 minutes, bub. Bub, I assume, is spelled B-U-B. 5 minutes and you're out. And I said, well, Barbara, you know, I plan to do a story on your entire life story. Do you think we can do it in 5 minutes? And she says, whatever you can do in 5 minutes, you can do. And she was right. So we flash forward some years later. I think she was doing, I forget the movie she was doing. But I was scheduled to do another interview with her, and I thought, uh-oh, trouble, what are we going to do? So I will tell you a secret of getting a good interview. Do research on them, find things that they're extremely interested in, and get information on it. And when you first enter the room, hit them with something that you know they like to talk about. Very often it is the name of their children. That's a dead giveaway. How is Penelope? How is Susie Marie? Or whatever. And they will automatically light up. A trap that you get into, they love to talk about their charities. But nobody wants to read about it. Nobody wants to read about their charities. So don't go that way, because they'll talk, but they'll say something that nobody wants to hear. So I knew, I had read that Barbra Streisand was collecting antique furniture. And she wanted a Louis XV something, God knows what it was. Louis XV antique blah blah she was looking for. All over the world she had been looking for this and had not found it. So I got the name and phone number of an antique store in Williamsburg, Virginia. There is not a chance in hell that this antique store would have that chair. But who knows, you know what. So we go in. So I get the regular cold shoulder. She says, oh yeah. Okay, we've got 10 minutes for this, and what is it? What? Ask me what? We're behind schedule. We are 3 hours behind schedule with these interviews, so we have to move along here. I said, Barbara, it's perfect, all right. I said, you know, Barbara, I found a antique store that might have the Louis XV chair you're looking for. And she said, oh, what, where? Yeah, I said, I have the name and the telephone number of the store. And she says, she lit up like a neon light. She snapped her fingers, snapped her. 5 people came running. She says, give it to them. She says, call them right away. They might have the chair. Well, I was hoping that they would not phone until after I had left, because I seriously had considered just making up a telephone number, which wisely I did not. It was an authentic telephone number. It was an antique store in Colonial Williamsburg, and happily people know Colonial Williamsburg, and they know that they might call, and they might call. So they went away. She said, I think that is a very nice, considerate thing for you to do. I said, thank you. So we talked. So then she said the supreme compliment. She said, would you like an autographed picture? I said, yes, yes, fine. She snaps her finger. 5 people come running. She says, no, bring the big color one. So they come out with this huge color thing. And she said, and what is your name again? And I said, my name is Mal. She said, M-E-L? I said, no, M-A-L. Mal. Very unusual. So she does this thing with Mal, this autographed picture, the supreme anointment of all time. So 45 minutes go by, and they came and says, Barbara, it's time for the next interview. She said, I beg your pardon, what interview? Barbara, we are like 4 hours behind now with the interview. She said, I'm talking with Mal here, and we're checking on the chair. And I will let you know when we're through here. And don't bother us again. I will let you know when we're through here. Well, yes, Barbara, we just want to let you know that you're behind. Well, fine. Now, she says, now, are you sure you have enough for the article? I said, well, yes. And then I really had just about run out of questions.